Sea of Japan. 3:45 p.m. Late afternoon light, clear skies, calm seas. From the surface, nothing appeared unusual. Commercial shipping lanes remained quiet. Air traffic followed routine corridors. Visibility was near perfect, ideal conditions for surveillance, navigation, and control. Then, at exactly 3:45 p.m., the posture changed. North Korean early warning systems shifted from passive monitoring to active targeting. Fire control radars powered up along the western coast, not tracking the sky, not scanning for aircraft. They locked onto a single point at sea, a U.S. Navy destroyer operating in international waters. What followed was not a drill, not a test, not a warning shot. Inside hardened launch facilities near Pyongyang, final launch protocols were initiated, fueling sequences completed, guidance systems aligned, command authorization confirmed. These were not short-range weapons, not regional missiles, not symbolic launches. They were intercontinental ballistic missiles, North Korea's most powerful strategic assets, nuclear capable, designed to strike across continents. And they were not aimed at distant land targets. They were aimed directly at a moving warship. At 3:52 p.m., 2 ICBMs ignited simultaneously. Massive plumes of flame tore upward, visible across multiple sensor networks within seconds. Infrared satellites detected the launches instantly. Regional radar arrays lit up. Tracking data propagated across Allied systems in real time. This was unprecedented. Ballistic missiles are designed for cities, for fixed coordinates, for deterrence. They are not meant to be fired at warships. North Korea's calculation was blunt. Fire 2 strategic missiles at an American destroyer. Force retreat, or destruction. Demonstrate that U.S. naval forces could be held at risk by strategic weapons. Shock the region. Seize the narrative. They believed the ship would have no defense. They believed the United States would hesitate. They believed escalation would work in their favor. They were wrong. Within seconds of launch, Allied systems confirmed trajectory solutions. The missiles were not test shots, not splashdowns, not demonstrations. They were inbound. Estimated impact window, minutes. At 3:56 p.m., the destroyer's combat systems transitioned to full engagement posture. Missile defense protocols activated automatically. Tracking refined. Intercept solutions calculated continuously as the missiles climbed toward space. Across the region, command centers shifted from observation to execution. Air assets already airborne were retasked. Strike packages were preloaded. Counter-response planning moved from contingency to inevitability. This was no longer about interception alone. The launch itself had crossed a line. From 3:45 p.m. to 4 p.m., the Sea of Japan became the center of the world's most dangerous equation. 1 destroyer, 2 intercontinental missiles, and a decision window measured in seconds. What happened next would not only determine the fate of that ship, it would reshape the strategic balance of the entire region, and it would happen faster than anyone expected. At 3:57 p.m., both missiles cleared the upper atmosphere. The engines cut, the burn phase ended, and the warheads entered space. At more than 200 kilometers above the Earth, the 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles separated into their mid-course trajectories, traveling faster than Mach 20. Silent now, invisible to the naked eye. For most targets on the planet, this phase means inevitability. For USS John Finn, it meant opportunity. The destroyer's combat system had already completed thousands of calculations. Trajectory solutions refined every fraction of a second. The intercept window was narrow, measured not in minutes, but in seconds. There would be no second chance. At 3:58 p.m., the order was given. Engage. From the forward vertical launch cells, 2 SM-3 Block 2EA interceptors erupted skyward. No warheads, no explosives, just speed, guidance, and precision. Within seconds, both interceptors were accelerating beyond Mach 15, climbing through the stratosphere, punching into near space. This was not a missile duel. It was geometry at hypersonic speed. As the interceptors climbed, their kinetic kill vehicles separated, small maneuverable bodies using infrared sensors and micro-thrusters to track targets colder than the background of space itself. At 3:59 p.m., the first intercept occurred. 300 kilometers above the Earth, the kill vehicle collided directly with the first ICBM's warhead. No explosion, just pure kinetic energy. The missile disintegrated instantly. Debris scattered into harmless trajectories, vaporized by velocity and distance. Seconds later, the second interceptor adjusted course. The second warhead attempted minor evasive maneuvers, but at those speeds, there was nowhere to go. At 4:00 p.m., the second collision occurred. Direct hit. The second ICBM ceased to exist. 2 strategic weapons. 2 perfect intercepts. 0 margin for error. Below, aboard USS John Finn, confirmation lights turned green across the Combat Information Center. Radar tracks vanished. Space-based sensors confirmed debris dispersion. No re-entry signatures, no descending objects. The threat was over. The ship never maneuvered, never fired a gun, never took damage. 300 sailors stood where they were, alive, because the intercept had happened far beyond the atmosphere. But the region did not relax, because interception was only the first phase. From the moment the missiles launched, the response clock had already started. The missiles were gone, but the launch itself had already triggered something far larger, and while debris burned up silently over the ocean, orders were being executed elsewhere. At 4:01 p.m., the intercept was confirmed. Both missiles destroyed, no re-entry, no secondary threats. For the crew aboard USS John Finn, the immediate danger had passed. Consoles stabilized. Alarms fell silent. The ship remained exactly where it had been minutes earlier, untouched. But across the region, no one stood down. Because interception did not erase the meaning of what had just happened. 2 nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles had been fired at an American warship. That was not deterrence. That was not signaling. That was an act of war. At 4:02 p.m., automated reports reached Allied command centers simultaneously. Satellite confirmation, radar correlation, space-based debris tracking. Every system agreed. This was not a test launch. This was not a misfire. Intent had been established. Within seconds, contingency protocols that had existed only on paper shifted into live execution status. The response did not require debate. It required confirmation. At 4:04 p.m., senior commanders reviewed a single question. Had strategic weapons been used against U.S. forces? The answer was yes. The window for response was already open. At 4:06 p.m., pre-authorized counterstrike frameworks moved from conditional to active. Target packages, built years earlier, updated weekly, and rehearsed countless times, were unlocked. Missile infrastructure, launch support facilities, command and control nodes, the architecture behind the launch. No cities, no population centers, only the systems that made the attack possible. At 4:08 p.m., airborne assets already on patrol received encrypted updates. Course corrections uploaded silently. Weapon systems transitioned from standby to live. No public announcement followed. None was needed. At 4:10 p.m., regional allies were notified through secure channels. The language was brief, precise, unambiguous. A strategic threshold has been crossed. No objections were raised, because no one wanted to normalize the idea of ballistic missiles being fired at ships. At 4:12 p.m., the authorization was finalized. Not as a speech, not as a press release, as a sequence of digital confirmations moving through hardened networks. The decision was not framed as retaliation. It was framed as removal. Removal of capability, removal of infrastructure, removal of the assumption that such an action could ever be attempted again. By 4:14 p.m., the strike clock was running. The missiles had been intercepted in space, but the response was already in motion. And while the world saw nothing, no explosions, no headlines, no alerts, the most consequential phase of the confrontation was about to begin. Because in modern warfare, the loudest moment is often not the most important. The most important moment is the one that happens quietly, after the threat is gone. By 4:18 p.m., the region had gone quiet. Not peaceful, not relaxed, controlled. Strike packages that had been activated minutes earlier completed their task without public visibility. There were no broadcast alerts, no emergency statements, no footage released. But inside military networks, the assessment was clear. The infrastructure behind the launch no longer existed. Missile preparation facilities were rendered inoperable. Launch support systems were disabled. Command and control nodes ceased responding. The systems that enabled the attack had been removed, not symbolically but physically. By 4:25 p.m., satellite imagery confirmed secondary effects. Facilities once active showed no power signatures, no communications, no movement consistent with recovery operations. There was no follow-on launch, no retaliation, no attempt to escalate, because the window had closed. What made this moment different was not the speed of the response, but its precision. No population centers were targeted, no broad strikes were executed. The response was limited to one objective: ensure that what happened at 3:45 p.m. could not happen again, and it worked. At sea, USS John Finn resumed patrol operations. The ship never left its assigned sector. No emergency maneuvering, no withdrawal. No visible sign that it had just been the target of a strategic attack. For the crew, the day continued, but the meaning of their presence had changed. Across the region, Allied naval operations adjusted posture. Surveillance patterns widened. Deterrence messaging shifted quietly but decisively. No press conference explained it. None was needed, because every actor watching understood the message. Ballistic missiles fired at ships would not create leverage. They would erase capability. By nightfall, diplomatic channels reopened, but the tone was different: cautious, restrained, calculated. The region did not slide into war. It stabilized. Not because nothing happened, but because something decisive had already occurred. 2 missiles had been intercepted beyond the atmosphere. And in response, the architecture that launched them had been dismantled, without spectacle, without delay, and without ambiguity. This was not escalation. It was correction, and it redefined the boundary. From that afternoon forward, one assumption no longer held: that strategic weapons could be used for intimidation without consequence. The Sea of Japan returned to routine operations. But everyone involved knew the truth. The most important moment of the confrontation wasn't the launch, or even the intercept. It was what happened quietly afterward, when the region learned, in less than an hour, exactly where the line was and why it should never be crossed again.